Hey everybody, welcome back to Up the Vibe. Today I'm joined by Gary Osborn and James Rose, who's hoping to join in a bit. Gary has been a writer on mysticism, esoteric traditions for more than 20 years, and he's collaborated with authors like Scott Creighton, Philip Coppens and Robert Bauval on books and various articles, especially about the new discoveries regarding the Great Pyramid of Giza. He has also worked closely with Jim Penniston, who was previously on the podcast on deciphering the binary code message Jim received. And we'll be diving into that today. How are you, Gary?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks, Joe.
Good to have you
I
on.
mean, what do you want to start on first?
Sure. Yeah. Well, let's start by just have a brief introduction about how you kind of came across, getting into the Pyramid of Giza, and then moving on to how you got to know Jim and collaborated with him.
Yeah, I started research in '97 because of an experience I had in '93, and I wanted to learn about that experience, and I was just researching into it because I've never had anything like it before.
What kind of experience?
Well, what I later found out, it was a Kundalini kind of awakening experience, But and because of the symptoms of the experience I had, and so that's how I really got into kind of researching stuff, and I was really wanting to find out about the experience I had. But it happened to me spontaneously without any prior instruction or knowledge about it. And so while I was doing all the research on it, I was having insights into things. And I think that experience I had was kind of conducive to having these insights and making connections between things. So that's how I got started with this kind of material, with these areas of research. And I first wrote a book with Philip Gardner called The Serpent Growl. That was in 2005, where I introduced some of the things I'd been working on, some of the discoveries I'd made from my own experience. But really, I had no preconceived ideas or anything about it. So it was just straight from what I kind of experienced and the insights I had into it. So then I wrote a book called The Shining Ones, even though it was by me and Philip Gardner. I mean, his name's on the cover, but he only contributed 16 pages, the last 16 pages of that book. So really, it was a book I'd written. It was what it was the publishers wanted an updated book of one of his book called The Shining Ones, but Philip Gardner didn't want anything to do with it, so it was left to me to kind of update it. But it was a rewritten book, really, in the end. So those books, they sold quite well, and I was still researching. I was writing articles, and then in 2010, Jim Penniston got in touch with me. And I knew who he was because I'd seen a documentary of someone acting as him. And because of what I'd learned from the documentary, I thought, well, that'd be an interesting guy to talk to. And then 2 weeks later, he gets in touch with me out of the blue.
Oh, really? Okay.
And so he introduced himself. Yeah. And he introduced himself, and he said, I want you to look at this code. And so I said, well, what code? What? And he said, the first 5 pages have been on ancient aliens, it's been put out, it's in the public domain. But he says there was 16 pages in total. I mean, he didn't actually know how many pages he had. He didn't really look at the number of pages. But anyway, we found out 16 pages. And in those 16 pages, along with the text, was 7 sets of geographical coordinates. And he just had them deciphered by Joe Luciano, who helped him with a code. He was a kind of binary code expert. And he was in the USAF as well. But he helped Jim with the code, and soon after he deciphered these 7 sets of coordinates, Jim sent them to me, and he sent them to me on the 2nd of February 2011. And so I was kind of really intrigued by this, and I looked in Google Earth. I thought it's the only way I'm going to see what these coordinates are pointing to, and it was kind of really dramatic seeing the cursor kind of move to these ancient sites, across the globe.
Yeah.
And so I logged down what I had found with these 7 coordinates, but he wanted to see if I could find any additional information. You see. And I did. Within the first few months, I did, because it was the way I approached it. And I can see now why this code fell into my lap, because it's the way I approach certain, how I do my research. So,
is this a good time to maybe show the coordinates and the locations?
You've got the graphic, haven't you?
And I might match that now. And I think for anyone who's listening, this is the moment where I say that we'll try our best to explain what we're showing, but you might want to watch the video on the podcast on YouTube. But so let me try and share screen. And okay, so I think
that's the message. That's the binary code message.
This is how the message comes out pretty much when deciphered from the binary code, and it's not just the coordinates. It's got this message in there in English, right? And this is what I would like. I was talking to Jim about the other day. If it seemed like a deliberate message to be received by Jim, it wasn't like he happenstance touched the craft and then whoever touches the craft got a message. This message was relayed to him because it's done that in a way that he can decipher.
As if it was deliberate. As if it was deliberate.
If he was French, for example, it might have been in French, right? Could you imagine that? I don't know.
It's we've looked at all those aspects.
Yeah, and it's got these coordinates here. I did mention sort of glibly to Jim, why can't it be a bit more explanatory? Do they have like a limited number of characters or to transmit in the code? But they could have said, I'm such and such from the year, but it's kind of cryptic in a way. But there is an element to it that looks like it's trying to help us, this continuous for planetary advance, exploration of humanity. Origin year 8100. Now that is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about that later. And it's got the 666 in there as well, which kind of makes people think, kind of get wary about going on.
And this is from the book, and this shows a map with the points on it, just to give an aspect, a sort of perspective. So this is what you were doing. So going back to what you were saying, you were just going in Google Earth and finding all these locations.
Yeah. I mean, you can't say one thing without having to say several other things, So how I can explain that is that I first started with Google Earth, where you see everything on the globe. But I wanted to see them all together in a map projection of the Earth, like you see there. With,
the Mercator projection.
And that was Google Maps. And the reason being is because when Jim first sent me the coordinates, he said, could you just, give it a go, give it your best shot, see if you can find any, additional information. He titled the email 23.5 degrees. Okay. So I thought, well, I got back to him. I said, why did you title 23.5 degrees? He said, because I've had dreams about it. I've had dreams about 23.5 degrees. He said, but I thought it may have something to do with certain temperatures, regions of the planet. And I said, no. It's the Earth's obliquity angle, the tilt angle of the Earth in respect to the ecliptic plane. I said, most textbooks will give it as 23.5 degrees, an overall number, but it's 23.43 degrees right now, and it's decreasing. That comes from the book that I wrote with Scott Creighton, where I was able to kind of superimpose the Great Pyramid. It all lines up. It's actually pointing to its location on the Earth through these angles that are in the internal dimensions.
But we see here the north-south is tilted from the elliptic pole by 23.5 degrees.
From the ecliptic, in respect to the ecliptic, because that would be the Earth's orbit around the sun. It's like the sun's pole. You see what I'm saying? So it's tilted in respect to that. I mean, you do get people saying, how can it be tilted? Because there's no up and down, no left in space, There's no east and west. But it's tilted in respect
tilt that gives us the seasons, isn't it?
yeah, but there's belief that the Earth was once upright.
Yeah.
You know, and if it was upright, there wouldn't be any seasons. It would be continual springtime. It'd be temperate weather all year round at certain latitudes, you know, above the equator and below the equator, which makes people believe that maybe during that time, that was the Garden of Eden, you know, when the Earth was upright with temperate weather, continual springtime.
Yeah.
And there was no death, there was no season where there was an intermission in the growth of vegetation and that, and the winter, you know, death and that kind of thing. So people saw the tilted Earth as an imbalance, as it reflected an imbalance in human consciousness, you know, that it's to do with sin, the reason why we have so much conflict, wars, you know, all kinds of conflict. They saw the tilt of the Earth being responsible for that. See, and if it was upright, everything would be balanced. You see. So, and actually, one of the themes of the code is balance. Is us getting back to balance, because you know how crazy the world is, especially now. So that's one of the themes in the code. I think that's part of the message that I picked up from just looking at the coordinates. You see, there's just so much information in those seven, encapsulated in those 7 sets of coordinates. There's enough there, and I'm not just, you know, being dramatic about it. There's enough there to fill 3 large volumes of what's come out of those 7 coordinates. And as I said, I've been working on it for the last 12 years, and I found just a massive data that's come out of just those 7 sets of coordinates. So when you say that's, you know, it's a kind of, it doesn't say much in the message. There's a lot said in those 7 sets of coordinates when you look into them, when you study them.
Yeah.
But it's all mathematical. And I'm thinking that the reason why it's all mathematical, because mathematics is, you know, it's a universal language. Everything is mathematical, you know, and it's how you would prove something. So it's, what I'm saying is proving the things that it's telling us through mathematics. There wouldn't be any two ways about it. You see what I'm saying?
Because they've used English here, which isn't universal, but then they've encoded mathematics in there, which is that to try and get us to explore it further, but the mathematics gives it a sense of validity.
Yeah, I mean, mathematics is factual. You can't argue against 2 times 2 is 4, you know. So it's yeah, it kind of validates itself. It authenticates itself through the mathematics, which we'll go on into later about the fine structure constant.
I guess we've got the issue with language of different ways of reading the same sentence and different understanding, but 2 times 2 equals 4 is pretty much the same understanding.
Well, I'm just using that example, but you know what I'm saying, that you know, I mean, everything is mathematical. Scientists think that mathematics is just you know, it's an invention, it's a human invention, or it's just a tool to try and get at certain information in it. But no, reality itself is mathematical. It's existence. Everything is mathematical. Thought, feelings, everything's mathematical.
It's hard to comprehend, but there is a lot of information about how reality is. They talk about it being the matrix, but in terms of being like this creation, and it's what is sort of geometrical in structure, and it's just all bound in this kind of complex geometry, this special geometry that somehow manages to manifest all reality, which is mind-blowing. But there's a lot of information out there pointing to that.
Yeah, I mean, I hated math at school. I mean, I think a lot of us do. You know, we're kind of intimidated by mathematics and, you know, arithmetic and that. But that's what the code taught me, is that, you know, everything is mathematical, and it's not just that. You know, it's all the geometry as well. But what it does is it gives us these themes of information, these themes, by distances, by having certain significant number distances, you know, between certain things, and they're kind of mostly in numbers that are called processional numbers. You know, I'm sure you've heard of the law of precession. you know, and the cycle of 25, 9,
that's right, yeah,
20 years, which is the ancient estimate. I think the scientific estimate is 25,776, something like that. Mm-hmm. But you see that the ancients encoded the estimate and all the subdivisions of that number in their temples. And the reason why they used the number 25920 is because everything reduces down to the number 9. And it was an easier way to remember it and how to encode it. So, and all this comes up at Giza. A lot of the distances are in these subdivisions of the precessional cycle, you know. Mm-hmm. But the code actually points all that out.
Yeah.
You know, the code actually leads us to that, what was encoded at Giza by whoever built Giza, whoever designed it and built it. And, you know, I'm now getting it's made me think that maybe Giza wasn't built by the ancient Egyptians. It may be the intelligence that sent us the code, you know, but there may be some kind of connection there. Maybe information being sent back into the past. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a bit later. And apologies, it sounds like just had a message that James might not be able to join. So he might join a bit later, but I think at the moment I have to assume that he won't be able to join this conversation. But turning back to these codes, so just for those listening, there's codes on here there's a number of places, and should we go through each one individually? The first one is High Brazil, and I was looking at that on a map, and is that a submerged island just off island itself? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just off the southwest coast of Ireland. Yeah. And there is something there because you see these heat maps, and they're showing you. It shows there's something there, you know.
And it's also had a name, something to do with Danann, or can you remember that?
No,
there was another name. It was just weird because I've interviewed Elena Danann recently, and it just had a weird coincidence there. But I don't think there's any connection. But it was just something that popped up when I was looking at it.
There's so many meaningful coincidences, synchronicities associated with this.
Yeah.
I mean, all the 12 years I've been working on it, all these kind of associated, how to put it, the meetings I've had with people that are either indirectly involved or directly involved in the code, you know, and the Rendlesham incident. So it's like a synchromesh phenomena, you know. You know, like all these synchronicities coming up. And one of them is I met Nick Pope by chance in 97, you know, in 1997. He walked into my pub, and I thought, well, this is too much of a synchronicity here. You know,
because of course he worked with Jim, didn't he? And on that.
Yeah, well, this is what I'm saying. This was in 97. And I thought I need to go over and have a chat with him. So I did. I introduced myself to him. And we did meet up in that pub, which is in Surrey, Merton Abbey Mills. It was called the William Morris on the river. And we used to meet up there almost every week for about, 3 or 4 times. Mm-hmm. And and I told him about that experience I had, and the reason why I was kind of interested in the UFO phenomenon is because I thought there was a link to it with this experience I had, because I found kind of the symptoms of that experience in contactees' accounts and so-called abductees' accounts. So I thought there might be a connection there, but he really didn't know what I was talking about Kundalini. I don't think he ever really researched into it or knew about it. So we kind of went our separate ways. But then Jim Penniston gets in touch with me, as I said, like, was it 14 years later? And I did ask Jim, I said, you know, I met up with Nick Pope and we were talking, we were having discussions. I said, did he tell you, you know, that we went? And Jim said, no, I didn't know anything about that. So, and why would he, you know? I mean, me and Nick Pope, we went our separate ways and that was it. And that was before I was an author, long time before I became an author. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm just saying that there's kind of strange kind of meetings with people and being introduced to certain people who are kind of indirectly or directly involved with it.
Yeah, yeah.
But where were we? What would we say?
I was just going through. So we've got High Brazil, then we've got this Caracol in Belize, Sedona in Arizona, Then some more well-known ones: Giza in Egypt, the Nazca lines in Peru, and I was in Peru not long ago. It's an amazing place. Tianshan in China, if I've said that right.
Taishan. It's a sacred mound there. So
yeah,
what you've got with most of these places are pyramids or sacred mounds, or just these kind of what Jim thought they were kind of vortices. You know, he thought there was vortexes at these or vortices at these locations, like window areas. You know, kind of dimensional window areas. And but what I found was there's just another level of meaning with that, because they all connect up. And you know, when he said about the 23.5 degrees, one of the reasons why I started looking at the coordinates on the map projection of the Earth is because I found a lot of paintings that referenced the angle of 23.5 degrees, you know, like staffs and swords, all at that angle. And there's just so many of them, and they're exactly at that angle. So it's as if, you know, they were encoding the Earth's axis angle in those paintings, mostly from the 17th century. You know, when the church was, you know, they said that the Earth was at the center of the universe and it wasn't tilted. So I think people were kind of encoding this in the paintings as if to kind of encode real scientific knowledge about the Earth, you know, and its true condition.
Okay, interesting. So
anyway,
Jim was quite deliberate, or maybe a subconscious thing.
It's more complicated than that, you see, because they go back before the church. These references to the angle go back before the church was ever conceived, you know.
Okay.
The Catholic Church. So Jim, as I said, he had dreams about 23.5 degrees. So I wanted to look at them on a map projection of the Earth, because I wanted to measure the angles between the coordinates. And I found that from Nazca to Giza on the flat map projection is 23.5 degrees. Right? And then I found that from Nazca to Caracol, Belize, which is a Maya pyramid there, it's called the Karna pyramid. That's another 23.5 degrees there as well.
So how do you work that out? First one. So looking at this map here, is this a good map to show? So you got So when you draw that, so that line Caracol to Giza,
it's 23.5 degrees, and
against what? Against the equator.
Yeah, well, what I mean is, it's as on a map projection of the Earth, you would get those angles, but on a globe you wouldn't. You'd have to use azimuth, because that takes into consideration the curvature of the Earth. But on a map projection of the Earth, flat map projection, you'd be able to measure those angles, and they're exact, like 23.5 from Nazca to Giza, and then from Giza to Caracol is perpendicular. It's still 23.5. And then you find that from Nazca to High Brazil, I think that's how the Irish pronounce it, it's 51 degrees, which is the side angle of the pyramid. So what I'm saying to you is, and I didn't send you a graphic of that, because it's something that I'm.
Do you want to direct us from this? So this is starting from the ones you sent me. If you want to direct through that and talk through this.
You see, there's Nazca highlighted there in a red box.
That's right, yeah.
The reason why I did that, because we got those other graphics that I sent that in a sequence after that. But you see, because now we're kind of dipping around and I'm kind of losing.
Sure. So let's start from here and go through in the order that you sent. So
that was number 15, was it?
No, this is number 1.
Number 1.
Yeah.
I don't recognize that. I don't recognize it.
So then this is number 2 here.
No, that should be number 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what we got is the Nazca, right? That's what was highlighted in the message there, in the binary code message. Yeah. So those are the Nazca coordinates. And it goes all the way to Giza. You see that line? It's going all the way to Giza.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think we go to the next one. So what it was, I looked at the distance, and I found it was 7687 miles. And now I found 7687 miles in the public domain. It had already been mentioned, that number, in relation to this guy called Stanley Mailer, his theory called the phi line, about the golden number. And so that was already in the public domain. So I wanted to find where at Giza it was exactly 7687 miles, because whoever devised the code had used a number that was in the public domain so that it would verify what it's trying to show us. You see what I mean?
So this is the distance between Nazca and Giza.
Yeah.
In miles.
It's exactly 7687 miles. But you see, I looked at it in meters so that I could scale it down, so that I could define it properly. You know, refine.
I'll be asking about this, but it does seem some things seem to be talked about in miles, sometimes in meters, sometimes in royal cubits. Why do things jump around in measurements so much in terms of?
Well, meters and royal cubits, they're compatible, because I found that the royal cubit was derived from the meter. It's simple.
So that makes sense.
Absolutely simple. Well, you get a 1 meter diameter wheel, and the circumference will be pi. Okay, and if you divide pi by 6, you get the royal cubit in meters.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can imagine now they measure distances with just using a wheel with 6 spokes, and they would roll it along, and they would measure royal cubits out just by measuring off where the spokes turn up in a line.
Yeah.
So that's how they measured royal cubits.
How come they're using feet in inches or miles and things?
No,
like this?
I don't really go into that, because you've got to look at the royal cubits, because that's what the ancient Egyptians used. So but the meter, I'm sure they knew about the meter, because it's an earth measure. And they knew about the measures of the earth, because that's all encoded in the Great Pyramid. But that's another thing entirely. That's another book.
But here we've got miles. So 7,687 miles. Is that just miles because it becomes, that number is shown in miles? Is it just because of that?
No, as I said, whoever devised the code had used a number that was already in the public domain.
Right. Okay.
If you just think about 7687, it doesn't mean anything.
Exactly.
But when you find that someone used it in their theory and have mentioned it, and it's on the internet,
okay,
then you think, okay, so what they did was they used that number, which was in the public domain, to verify this alignment. Okay, and the reason being, I mean, there is a connection there, because the guy Stanley Mailer, who had this theory about 7687 miles, he said that if you multiply that by phi, you get the diameter of the Earth in miles. You see, or the diameter, or maybe the radius? I'm not sure. I can't remember this. And he said that the distance between Nazca and Giza is 7687 miles. Right. So there was that connection there anyway. So whoever devised the code used that, but you have to find what whoever devised the code is trying to say. You've got to make sure that you get it exactly at 7687 miles anywhere on the Giza plateau. Okay, do you see what I mean? From Nazca.
So from my understanding, well, I think the research of Stanley Mailer is that the distances, this distance here that we're talking about, is related to the Earth itself in terms of the geometry of the Earth, and that there's a relationship there, and that may have been the reason for the distance between these two points. And without going into that details, when we're seeing it here from the code, what we think the message is doing is almost replaying our knowledge back to us to kind of say, hello, here's something that you've devised, and here it is in the code. So that's kind of like a communication that they're trying to start, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a way of verifying what you're finding.
Okay,
because you've got something to pin it to, But this happens a lot with the code. It's not just this. I mean, they use numbers that are already in the public domain to verify what they're telling us. So that's not the only number. I mean, there's another number which is 7953, which is also in the public domain. But I won't go into that yet.
Yeah.
So
like a lot of numbers. So
this
here
is
we are.
complicated. No, trying to explain all this and trying to describe how I got to each piece of the puzzle is difficult, because you can easily lose people with this. And I mean, we've already overlooked what I was saying about the 23.5 degrees, that what that has to do with the Earth's axis. There's all these themes that are coming out with the code, and they're all connected. So there's something about the Earth's axis. There's a timeline at Giza, which is what I call the Giza diagonal. It's what a lot of people call it. They call it the Giza diagonal or the pyramid diagonal. And that's a timeline. That's a processional timeline. The code also points to Svalbard, where there's the seed vault, the doomsday seed vault there, where all the seeds are kept in case of a global catastrophe. Do you know about that?
I know about the vault, but you say the code has that inside it.
Yeah, because the Giza coordinates, in the Giza coordinates, the last four digits of the latitude coordinates and the longitude coordinates, when you put them together, if you take those 4 digits, the last 4 digits of each, you can make another set of coordinates out of them, and it will lead you to Svalbard, which is only like 16 miles away from the seed vault. Yeah, so there's a connection there.
Okay.
And also, if you draw a line on the map projection of the Earth from Higher Brazil to those coordinates at Svalbard, it's 23.5 degrees.
Another one of those, yeah. Okay.
And there's loads of that. There's loads of that kind of thing going on.
And for people who are maybe listening, what we're actually looking at the moment is a kind of aerial view of the Pyramid of Giza. Do you know when this was
aerial
taken?
View. Well, it's from Google Earth. So, and I usually use the was it the 2008 February 2008 imagery, because it's almost overhead, so you get the centers of the pyramids. Yeah.
Do you
know what I'm saying? Instead of like offset. So that one I think is from 2008. Now, what we're being told here, I mean, you see where I connect it to the west face of the Great Pyramid. It's not actually on the apex. It's not actually in the center.
No.
And there's a reason for that. It's pointing to that location on the pyramid for a reason, a specific reason. Because that shows all the fire-related geometry, the golden mean geometry.
Yeah, we'll come on to that. So this point here that you've got is the exact point within that's in the coordinates, and it's slightly off-centered from the main pyramid.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take the 7687 miles exactly, and you do that by looking at the meters, the meter distance, and then you can refine it. And that is the only monument on the Giza plateau that would be targeted by that 7687 miles exactly. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. So if they'd given you a coordinate which was exactly on the top, then this 7687 wouldn't have been accurate anymore?
No. And this is what this rules out any kind of and I put it, people have been trying to debunk it, to debunk the 7 sets of coordinates found in the code. They're saying that Jim Penniston took it from a site where these coordinates were already put up, on these pages before he had them deciphered or whatever, which is wrong really, because it doesn't work that way. I looked into that, and from what I found out, I think that site was hacked, and the numbers were changed just to try to discredit Jim Penniston and this code. I mean, there is a coordinated effort to try and debunk this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, right, Joe, is that the fine structure constant, that's factual. There's no way anyone could have known about that. It's predicted a number, a 12-digit number that comes up in the future in 2018. There's no way anyone could have known that or predicted it. So it doesn't matter how they're trying to debunk it. That is the bottom line. And it shows everything else is irrelevant. How they're trying to debunk it, how they're trying to criticize Jim and undermine him and the code. none of that matters. All the he.
We'll come on to the fine structure constant in a bit, hopefully. Yeah, in terms of how that's come from it.
But what I was going to say is all the he said, she said stuff is all irrelevant. So
there's history to this case, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, John Burroughs, who was out there with Jim. I mean, he's really against the code, but there was a time when he wanted to be part of it, because him and Jim Penniston went their separate ways. He's been criticizing Jim, and he's been trying to, discredit the code. And so he's out doing that now. I mean, he's doing interviews saying that, how is it that Jim did this, Jim did that? It just doesn't add up.
Yeah.
But we explained it all in the book that we wrote. We explained all those things. So he's bringing up things that are no longer, they're not relevant anymore. But people believe it. People are believing what Johnny's saying.
Yeah, I mean,
as I said, the code.
There's different sides to every story, and it's a complicated one. And there's humans getting involved in something, but I think the deeper message and what's really going on is what people really want to know. To put aside like the differences that people have with each other and the complexities.
Yeah, I mean,
of relationships.
Everyone's got their own agendas, and they're trying to spin things.
And we've got to remember that Jim, John, and Colt and all the who had all been involved. They've had a lot of time. They've had decades where people have been asking questions and they've been doing all these things that involved with Rendlesham. It gets quite intense, I guess, at times.
Yeah, it is. It's very toxic, actually.
Can be toxic.
But as I said, this is the bottom line: is that the code gives us this 12-digit number that no one could have known about. So all of that is irrelevant, and that's what people have got to remember if they start beginning to understand this. So anyway, so it's given us this location on the west face of the Great Pyramid, and there's a specific reason for that, but that's what it's pointing to. So if we go to the next one, we have to try and get through these. You see there's three of the 7 sets of coordinates are actually kind of referencing this point on the west face of the Great Pyramid. So it don't just happen once. It's 3 times. And you'll see that from the High Brazil to the Sphinx, it goes through that point on the west face of the pyramid again. Okay. And from the coordinates of Naxos, which is where the Temple of Apollo is, it goes through that point on the way to the Pyramid of Unas in Saqqara. And there's a reason for that too, because what the code is bringing attention to with this cache of records under the Sphinx, that's one of the themes as well, is that the connection to that, the so-called Hall of Records under the Sphinx is found in the Pyramid of Unas. And it's Manu Safesadeh that's been working on this, and he's got his book called out called Under the Sphinx. And you see, Manu's been helping me with the code, but what we find emerging from the code are things that relate to his research work and his findings. So it's like the code is the information that's coming out of the code. It relates to what's going on now.
Sure, but the Sphinx and this Pyramid of Unas, they're not coordinates on the code at all.
What it is that the pyramid, what's the texts on the walls of the Pyramid of Unas, which are called the pyramid texts, and that they're probably the oldest texts, religious texts that we found, and the hieroglyphics there, which Manu has been deciphering, they relate to the Sphinx, and this location of maybe where the records were deposited underneath. You see, so it's all related, and the code is pointing all this out, with these alignments and these distances. And so you can see, I mean, let's wrap this one up. I mean, you can see that the 3 sets of coordinates are referencing that point on the west face of the Great Pyramid.
Let's move on to this. So I've seen this one with the phi angle. This is quite a complex diagram.
It is, but what is essential about it is it's just showing us how the phi ratio template at Giza, and how the pyramids are kind of a position to this phi ratio. It all stems from that point on the west face of the pyramid. You see?
Okay.
Now,
yeah.
if you come down from that point on the west face of the pyramid, it intersects the Giza diagonal, which I was talking about, which is a timeline, okay, which we haven't really got time to go into, but you see it intersects that point, and that latitude that's going through it, which is 29.9766248. Can you see that? Which is the golden cut latitude. There's two golden cut latitudes here. The one that's north, the 29.9766248. That's the number that generates the fine structure constant to 12 digits. The inverse fine structure constant to 12 digits. So you can see that how it's pointed to that point on the west face of the pyramid, and you measure down 540 royal cubits, okay, which is 1/48 the precessional cycle, it's a subdivision of the precessional cycle. And then you measure down and you find that where it touches where it intersects the Giza diagonal, you look at that latitude that's going through, and that is called the golden cut latitude, because it divides the phi ratio distance between G1 and G3 in the south between 1 and 0.618.
So what is it that's led you or others as well to come to these conclusions, or to put these lines here and there, or have this golden cut? What sort of process
no one else has come to this. I've come to this myself just by studying the code. That's what it's given us.
So and Mano, did you say Mano is involved or not with this?
No, but I mean he acknowledges it, he endorses it.
So in terms of how you got to these angles and everything, what has led you to do that compared to other lines that you might be able to draw on this map that aren't here? I mean, there's to someone who looks at this the first time, there's a it can look a bit arbitrary. Why a line from this point to that point and not this point to that point? You know, it's what's the decision making to say that? Is there a kind of a series of events that led you to there?
You can see that each point confirms something, confirms another point, and is confirmed in turn by something else. It's an interlocking kind of grid of information. It all works. And when you say that it looks contrived, or no, because I've used these really accurate, reliable distance calculators to measure all this out. And as I said, the code, it's really weird how Jim Penniston was able to write down 7 sets of coordinates that encapsulate all this information. And the math is meticulous. I mean, these distances are correct. They're spot on.
So because the coordinate we've got is this west facing coordinate on where the pin is.
All that came from that west face point on the pyramid, and you just measure from it down, and you find that they are precessional number distances in precessional numbers, you know, in royal cubits.
So this is where the royal cubit comes in, which we've devised also as a relationship to the meter and pi. Yeah.
All that derives from what I found in the code. Yeah. What the code is telling us. Yeah.
And this kind of golden cut, is this something you've devised, or has anyone else come up with
I haven't devised it. It's something that just comes out naturally from all this geometry and from the distances we're given in royal cubits. You know, and so it's there. You know, it's not something that you make up. It's our, you know, it's all derived from this geometry, from this template, which is in the phi ratio.
Sure, I'm just trying to work out what if there's a like some underlying mathematics that led you to do this that has been used in other systems before, or anything that made you think, oh, let's try that. That was tried here, let's try it there. Or is this kind of a bit original in its thought?
I've had 12 years to work on it, so
yeah,
it's something that you work out, you know, over time, and then this is the conclusion you come to. But it's all mathematically perfect, you know, precise.
because there's a lot of work has been gone into this, and sort of condensing it into a small conversation is hard to elaborate how you've got to that conclusion. But sort of trying to get my head around if I was presented with this coordinate, would I go about exactly the same thing? I think that's what people like to see within a sort of a scientific circle, is if you gave this to someone else without any knowledge of what you'd done, would they come out with the same golden cut angle and come out with the same understanding, or might they come out with a different one? I think that's where
maybe not.
You might, if you were to give this and someone came up with the same ideas, you could give that to someone who's quite skeptical and say, look, this has happened now twice, completely independently. There's something to this. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, I'd agree that maybe someone would overlook it or would look at something else. And but what happened here is that it's all a logical step-by-step process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the thing is that what you see here, I mean, that's a major discovery in itself, that the pyramids at Giza are positioned to the phi ratio. But that is
so that when you say the position to the phi ratio, you mean that this bottom left one to the top one, there's and if you look at where the middle one is, there's a phi ratio embedded in there.
They're both 540 royal cubits. You know, you can see, you know, what I'm saying is the full distance between the latitude passing through the Great Pyramid at the top there and the latitude passing through the third pyramid at the bottom. You can divide that distance, which is, I think overall it's 1413.72 royal cubits, 413.72 royal cubits. And then you take 540 from that, and you're left with 873.72 royal cubits. And if you take 873.72 royal cubits and you divide by 540, you get 1.618 royal cubits, which is the phi ratio. So, I mean, it's all there. I mean, it is there. I mean, it's not something that I've kind of just made fit. It's actually the geometry that the pyramids are kind of positioned to.
Sure, I'm trying to understand how you've come to see some of these things. Like if the golden cut, the northern one, doesn't quite cross the top of the pyramid, is there a reason?
It doesn't have to. Doesn't have to.
Okay.
You see the way the golden cut south. You know, the golden cut south, that goes through the south base of the second pyramid anyway. So it's all the phi ratio. It's just that you can. You know, you just divide the phi ratio, and so you get it. It's like I don't know, what do you call it? It's like a fractal. You know, you can keep going down and going down and going down with the same ratio.
So it's the sort of you sort of see this on the right hand side, the sort of the spiral notation there. That it's kind of like it's embedded in nature.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the two golden spirals there, you know, aligned with the position of G2, you know, the second pyramid anyway, you know, with the proportions of it. So what I'm saying is this is it's all naturally derived, but it's the code that kind of led me to this discovery. And that in itself is a major discovery without, you know, the fine structure constant. But you find that the golden cut latitude in the north is what generates the fine structure constant inverse number.
Okay. Is that where we're heading to next? Is that?
Yeah, it's like whoever devised the code had said, how to put it, Carl Sagan. Remember that quote by Carl Sagan? He said that the number 137, and especially the number of digits, you know, the decimal places after. He said that would be the quintessential candidate for the jewel in the crown of. You know, a message that's been sent.
So 137 is somewhere else. So the I think I've used this in physics before, that there's a shortcut to the fine structure constant is to do 1/137 as a shortcut, although it's not quite exact. I think it, but you've got the inverse. Well, you explain it this way: you've got the inverse number, which is 137.035999084. And if you was to take the number 1 and divide by that number, then you get the fine structure constant itself, which is like 0.007297
2535, something like that.
Yeah,
it just goes on, and there's like
So-
17 decimal places.
Mhm.
No, sorry, 17 digits, but 16 decimal places.
Is it worth maybe
what I
talking a
was
bit about
saying-
the importance of the fine structure constant in physics itself?
Yeah, what I was going to say is that it depends on the number of that's decimal places after the 137, which gives you an indication of how intelligent the sender, how intelligent the civilization is that sent the message. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's
a number
it's
of
a measure of how intelligent you are, how many
Yeah.
decimal places you've devised.
yeah,
or
it's a
it's
level
like
of
that with the speed of light or pi or other things as well, right? So
it shows the level of technology and the the level of intelligence behind that
and precision of
technology
the
to be able to
tools that
measure
you're using.
it. Yeah. Now we got to a point where we got it to 9 decimal places. But back in 1980, when Jim had received this code, I think we only had it to like 2 to 3 decimal places. Yeah. But at that time, when this latitude was passing through Giza, no one knew that it would generate the same 12-digit number that would be, determined by our physicists in 2018.
Okay.
So, and I say that it was in 1980 because you've got to take the tectonic plate motions of the African plate where Giza is situated, on which Giza is situated. You've got to take into consideration that motion, which is like 2.15 centimeters a year, and it's in a kind of northeast azimuth direction of like 51.46 degrees. And it's been consistent over the last 100 million years. So you've got to take that slow movement of the African plate into consideration when you're looking at coordinates, because the coordinates grid system is fixed, but it's the land underneath which is moving, So with the African plate, that's how it's 2.15 centimeters a year.
So that's why I was asking where this picture was from, because if this picture is sort of 2006, it doesn't quite relate to how the pyramids looked in 1980. Is that correct to say?
No, they are. The coordinates that I've got here are from 1980, relate to 1980, where...
But the picture that you're overlaying the coordinates on, is that a picture from 1980?
No, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Because, no, it doesn't matter because that Google Earth, you just take... you take an overhead view of Google Earth and you find out what the coordinates of the, sort of key points of the pyramid would be, how they would have been in 1980. And you just draw it up that way. It doesn't matter about, when the satellite photo was taken, if you see what I mean. Okay. I mean, you're only talking about less than a meter, yeah? From say between 2018 and 1980, it's less than a meter
of travel that the Earth has had. Okay.
But the thing is, the coordinates, the last few digits will change every year. Mm-hmm. See what I'm saying? So put it this way: in 1979, you probably would have changed by the last 4 digits would have changed. In 1981, after 1980. The
last 4 digits of what? The golden cut?
Yeah, the latitude number. Yeah. So in 1979, it wouldn't have, the latitude, the golden cut latitude wouldn't have generated the fine structure constant inverse number to 12 digits. And in 1981, it wouldn't have done that either. Okay. So 1980 was the only year that golden cut latitude, the numbers in that golden cut latitude, would have generated the fine structure constant inverse number. So what we're saying here is that could be the reason why the incident took place in 1980, because it was a way of providing proof of retrocausality, right? Time, some kind of manipulation of time by a civilization.
Okay.
It was a way of proving it. It was the only time it could have happened in the whole history of humanity. The whole timeline of our history, 1980 would have been the only year when the numbers in that golden cut latitude would have generated the fine structure constant of 12 digits.
So shall we talk about how that fine structure constant comes from this latitude? Is that?
Yeah, because let's go on.
Yeah.
So you can see here with what I've already said, that the coordinates from Nazca to Giza there on the west face of the pyramid is 7687 miles, and in the meters distance as well, which refines it. And then when you measure down from there, you measure 540 royal cubits down, so it touches the Giza diagonal. That gives you that latitude going through. And when you, in 1980, you find out that the numbers of that latitude, the Golden Cut latitude, was 29.9766248. Okay, is that understandable?
Yeah. So what I'm seeing here, and this is quite a good diagram. So it shows a relationship between the Golden Cut latitude, which is this quite special latitude, and its relationship to the point on that comes straight from the coordinates, and that's a distance, if you were to look between the two, of 540 royal cubits.
Yeah, and the 540 number. And the 540
number, 540 number is a special number in terms of
the processional stuff.
It's a processional number, yeah. I think
148 for 25, 9, 20 years.
And it's also important because it shows how the building of the pyramids itself was built to relate to these processional numbers and the phi ratios, and this is all talked about. I've heard people like Graham Hancock have talked about this, the kind of the mathematics that is underneath what looks like just three pyramids is quite incredible. So we've basically got here a relationship between this Golden Cut latitude and the actual coordinates itself that comes from
Nazca. So that west face point on the Great Pyramid, which produces all the phi ratio data, and then you measure down 540 from that point, and that's where you get the Golden Cut latitude, and it intersects where both intersect the Giza diagonal, and the Giza diagonal is a processional timeline.
So the line coming from the Nazca to Giza, how does that? Why is that important? Is it because that's the point which that intersects with the latitude that you're given by the coordinate? Is it that you get the longitude?
Well, yeah, because you just measure down from that point to the Giza diagonal, and you find that point is where the Golden Cut latitude passes through. So it's all kind of self-evident, I mean, it's all one thing predicts one thing, kind of confirms another, and that thing is confirmed by something else. It's all like an interlocking grid of information.
So if you were to take away that line that comes from Nazca, just imagine that wasn't there, you could still devise this 540 cubits line down to the Golden Cut latitude, right? Or not really? Would you not be able to get to the same conclusion?
You wouldn't have anything. You wouldn't have any kind of reference to it, really. What the code does, it provides us with the reference to that point on the west face of the pyramid. And as you know, it's not just the Nazca coordinates. You get that with the High Brazil coordinates and the Naxos coordinates. They all reference that point on the west face of the Great Pyramid. So once you've got that,
if you were to look at the other places like the Sphinx and the Una pyramid,
but all you see, that's what I'm saying is that it's all backed up by the other things the code is giving reference to. It's like an interlocking grid of information here. That's why I said to you that you can't really talk about one aspect of this without having to talk about the other things, because it's all kind of interlocked, and the measurements are so precise.
Yeah. Okay. So should we move on
you can see the logic. So you can see the logic of how that comes about.
I can see, in terms of how to get from the point that's on the coordinate down to the Golden Cut latitude from this diagram. I think,
it's a logical step-by-step process. No one is really going to appreciate it until they work on this themselves and follow what I've done.
Mm-hmm.
But when they do, they have that aha moment. They can't just be shown it; they've got to do it themselves to kind of appreciate it.
Okay.
So anyway, go to the next one.
Okay, so this is you on the calculator showing the fine structure constant, and you've got this here. Actually, you explain it.
Yeah, the number at the top here, 29.9766248, is the number in the Golden Cut latitude.
Let's have a look.
Okay.
Yeah. Without the dot.
I don't know. I think we're
with
missing
the dot in there, yeah.
We're missing a diagram which shows you the 320 and the 70. But anyway, the Golden Cut latitude number, if you multiply by 320 and you divide by 70, you get that inverse fine structure constant number, but it ends at 857 instead of 84. Okay. All right. So if you carry on, if you take 320, you divide by 70, it's the same as dividing 32 by 7. And then you get that number, 4.57142. And that just repeats. But that number, if you multiply the Golden Cut latitude number by that number, then you get the full 12 digits of the inverse fine structure constant, which is in the next graphic. See? The Golden Cut latitude number, and you divide by that number, which is like 332 divided by 7 or 320 divided by 70, and you get the full 12 digits. I mean, it goes 08457, but you get the first 12 digits of the inverse fine structure constant, which is, it's only 12 digits anyway.
So what we're saying is we were given a coordinate, and from that you've come to another latitude using the mathematics around the pyramid, and using the phi angle, and from that angle you've then multiplied by 32/7 to get the fine structure constant. And I think we need to know why 32/7 at the moment.
Yeah, maybe it's in the next diagram. I'm not sure. I don't know whether you skipped one. Look, there's the inverse fine structure constant number. See, it's the same.
Yeah.
137. It's in red. 137.035999.84. See, the same number generated by that latitude. The numbers in that latitude, Golden Cut latitude. Go on again.
Now, here we are. So 320 and 70s in here now.
Yeah, because they're in the distances. See what I said about the distances, the numbers in the distances, they're always usually significant, and they're giving you extra data which you can use. So the distance between the south edge, the south casing edge, the original south casing edge of the Great Pyramid, to the Golden Cut latitude is 320 world cubits, and the original north casing edge of G2, the second pyramid, is 70 world cubits north of the Golden Cut latitude. See, so you use those numbers, and if you go along from the Golden Cut latitude, you go along to the numbers on the right there, you can see how it works out. See?
Yeah, so I can see those numbers there. It looks quite magical, but I don't know how that. So this line to that line, what's the importance of those? How do we come to those? The importance of those lines?
Well, those distances exist at Giza. Those distances are in world cubits, and they are accurate because, as I said, I've used reliable, accurate distance calculators like the Vincenzi distance calculator to work all this out. And I mean, the Vincenzi distance calculator, that's accurate to like 0.5 millimeters. So, as I said, all this is meticulously kind of worked out. All the math is, is perfect. And I can prove that because I've got all the all the data on file to back it up.
But you were saying that it doesn't matter about the fact of when this picture of the pyramids was taken.
No, because what you see there, when I've outlined them in white, that would apply to the coordinates in 1980. You see what I'm saying? The edges of the pyramids, the base, the bases.
Okay, so the base of the pyramid in 1980 down to this Golden Cut latitude would have been 320 cubic meters in 1980.
No, because everything's relative. So when the land masses are moving, everything's relative. So they always remain the same. Distances always remain the same.
Okay, so it's 320 and it's still 320 today because they're all moving. Right, that makes sense. Yeah.
It's the coordinates it's the numbers in the coordinates that change. And that's why the number of the Golden Cut latitude in 1980 would be important to generate this fine structure constant inverse number.
Okay. So
I hope people again. So what you're saying is that people
the whole thing moves together, and that 320 by 70 always exists. But when you encapsulate that with the Golden Cut latitude in 1980, you get the fine structure constant.
That's it. Okay. It only happens in that year. So that makes me think, well, maybe that's the reason why the Rendlesham incident happened in 1980.
I mean, that is interesting. I mean, could it be coincidence? That's the question that you have, or are we looking for these numbers? You know, it is interesting how we've come to these conclusions. So the 320 and the 70, is that something that's come up in literature in terms of important distances?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's other researchers, other Giza researchers and writers, authors that you find that those numbers are in the public domain because they're in books and articles.
And in particular, the sort of the 320 divided by 70 aspect, is that something that's come up in literature, or is that something that you've kind of found?
If you take 70 away from 320, it's 250. The distance between was it
the north face and the south face?
Yeah, it'd be 250. That's right. And I mean that is in books and articles. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just hope people again, and when I say that maybe that's the reason why the incident happened in 1980, I mean that's just what I think. I mean, it's like it implies that.
Okay. And just going back to the logical side, so you've got this. I'm just trying to picture the scene. You've got these coordinates. Was there anything about you looking? Well, did the fine structure constant come out, and then suddenly you went, "Oh, that's the fine structure constant," or was it a bit of, I need to. If I find the fine structure constant in here, then I've definitely found the message. Which way around was it?
I know what you're saying. It all happened kind of slowly. I mean, as I said, I've been working on this for 12 years now.
Yeah.
And so it takes some time to all come about. But you see, I already discovered that the Golden Cut latitude was generating the fine structure constant number, the inverse fine structure constant number in 2018. But I didn't know the new determination yet. I was working on the last chapter of the book, and I was putting all this information in the last chapter about the fine structure constant with the Golden Cut latitude generating it. But at that time when I was working on the last chapter, I only had the 2014 determination, where the last three numbers are different. Instead of 084, it's 139. You see?
Yeah.
And then I thought, as I was working on the last chapter and putting this information in, which showed that it only worked to 6 decimal places, but that was good enough, you know. But then I thought, let's check on Wikipedia to see if the new determination has been published, and there it was. It was 137.035999084 or 084. So then I knew the code was authentic. It authenticated itself.
Yeah.
And what it is, you've got to look at the timing of it, of the timing of when that was published, when that data was published about the fine structure constant, which coincided with me writing the last chapter.
So what
and then I knew.
Yeah. I just trying to understand the process. Were you was the fine structure constant something that you were wanting to discover from the code, and then you found it through the mathematics, or was it a case of you applying mathematics and then lo and behold, here comes the fine structure constant, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Is it?
I just followed the steps logically. That's all. You know, like you've got the 320 and the 70 there, and I started juggling with the numbers.
Okay, because there's a lot of numbers that you can juggle with, and it's like, how do you know this one is important versus that one? I
Yeah, you see,
as someone who's a novice to all this, I wouldn't know where to start.
I'm not really a mathematician, you know. But Robert Bauval,
Mhm.
because I used to talk to him a lot on Skype, and you know, we discussed these things about Giza, and he said, "Can you find the fine structure constant at Giza or in the Great Pyramid?" And I didn't know anything about the fine structure constant then, you know. And so I thought, I'll have a look, because the thing is, I'm not a mathematician, but I'm able.
No.
He said I'm an intuitive. He said I'm an intuitive mathematician because I can remember phone numbers. I can remember. I can see a number that comes up, and
Okay.
I recognize it, and I recognize it in the calculation. So what you're doing is just juggling with numbers, and then you find that something comes up that you recognize, and you think, oh, that's got to be significant. And it's the same with finding that fine structure constant number.
So it sounds like that Robert Bauval had given the starting point, the kind of the genesis to this discovery somehow in conversation.
He is connected.
Yeah.
His work is connected to the code because of the Giza diagonal, all right, which is connected to his Orion correlation theory. But the thing is, the code is pointing to the Giza diagonal. That's how I found out about it being a precessional timeline. I mean, me and Scott Creighton, we knew about it being a precessional timeline. I mean, what we had derived from the measurements and everything, but it was what came out of the code verified it. You see what I'm saying? Because it gave us the original measurement or distance of the Giza diagonal, which is 2 160 royal cubits. And 2 160 royal cubits is it's a subdivision of the precessional cycle. So if you was to multiply 2 160, you get 12 960 royal cubits, which is half a precessional cycle. So then you realize that the Giza diagonal, you measure one way and you measure it in the opposite direction, and you multiply it by 6, you get the precessional cycle. You get 12 960 years one way and 12 960 years the other. And you've got the full precessional cycle of 25 920 years, right? But what is really kind of fascinating about the Giza diagonal, it's just this line, you know, which the Giza pyramids are aligned to. It's you can find dates on that timeline. You can find specific dates on it because of the measurement of it. You see.
Yeah.
So if you measure
this Giza, and just sorry to interject, but this Giza diagonal, it comes from are they two smaller pyramids? One is labeled G1A and one's G3A.
From the center. Yeah, from the center of G3A to.
I've not been to Giza myself. I'd love to go one day. So next to the Great Pyramid, there is 3 smaller pyramids. Yeah, but
you see, they're the Orion belt. They represent the Orion belt stars as well as the 3 large pyramids.
I've heard this, and it's quite compelling, the idea that it mirrors the Orion's belt as well as everything else.
You've got them aligned vertically, and you've got them aligned horizontally in the south, but they show the maximum and minimum culminations of when the Orion belt stars rise on the southeast horizon and set, you know, in the southwest. So I mean, those configurations, they kind of rise vertically in one era, which is like 460 BC, and they rise, or they set horizontally in 2500 AD.
Yeah. So I don't want to digress because that could be a whole new conversation. But it's
easy to digress.
Ultimately,
what I wanted to get to, was that Robert Bauval, that Giza diagonal timeline, is essential to his Orion correlation theory. All right. And the code points to it. And the thing is the code goes back to 1980, if you believe what Jim Penniston claimed. But I looked into it. I've been looking at this for 12 years now. I know he's telling the truth. It goes back to 1980. Robert Bauval didn't observe the belt stars connecting with the Giza pyramids until 1982, 2 years later.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to what we were saying at the start about the message being less about telling us something, but almost like repeating our own knowledge, almost like saying, here you go, here's stuff that you've come up with, and we're just repeating it back to you. In a way, as a sort of start a conversation, just sort of like verify their existence in a way, or whoever sent this, and then they haven't told us who they are or why, but they've just sent this message and verified their existence with coordinates that point to a deeper mystery about this planet than that we're trying to discover.
As I said, the bottom line is that the code, through this process, through this, all this data, it predicts a 12-digit number that would come up 38 years later. And no one could have known that. No one could have predicted it. And so all the faff about, Rendlesham incident, why did Jim do this? And, Jim, he contradicted himself on this and all that kind of thing, which we've explained in the book. It's all irrelevant.
Yeah. This shows so hypothetically, if we could go back in time and Jim hadn't kept that binary code for so long and had shared it straight away, and it had been taken seriously, people looked at it, do you think people would have come up with the fine structure constant?
No. I'll tell you why. Because all the tools that we would have needed to decipher the code were only made available after 2018, really.
In terms of the binary code reading?
We didn't have any accurate mapping data of Giza.
This is more the coordinate system,
it only started happening in 1984 when the first GPMP maps were being produced of Giza. And then we had to wait until Glenn Dash and the Glenn Dash Foundation went out there to Giza and measured everything. And they put survey points down. And that ended in 2018. So none of that data was available until 2018, which is when the fine structure constant was determined, that we could actually decipher this part of the code, you see. Mm-hmm. It was through actually Glenn Dash, through the data that he made available in 2018, which was on his website, and you could download the files with the measurements. It was through that I actually found out about the fine structure constant, about the Golden Cut latitude. Mm-hmm. And the numbers in the Golden Cut latitude, and that it was 540 world cubits down from the center of the Great Pyramid. The latitude that passes.
So it was Glenn Dash who gave inspiration to the Golden Cut latitude as a.
Well, it provided the maps for me to actually work it all out properly.
I see.
And you had to have the most reliable online tools. With the working out the African plate, the tectonic plate motion, you had to have tectonic plate motion calculators, the most reliable ones, and also the distance calculators. I said the Vincenzi distance calculator, which is one of the best. And they weren't made available. What I mean is they were made available long after the 1980, but they were available before 2018. But it was the mapping data that Glenn Dash provided, which was crucial to me being able to work all this out. So what we're saying is this could only be properly deciphered, after 2018. Which is what happened.
Yeah, so it seems the story is somehow whoever sent this message deliberately wanted it not only to be received in 1980, but also for it to be almost kept in the dark until it was possible to read it in 2018 onwards.
Yeah, because it coincided with the determination of the fine structure constant.
Which is very curious in this puzzle that we're trying to understand, because it seems almost like deliberate that Jim would put it away and not bring it back out to light until it was needed, which seems like there's almost like a controlling influence there to a certain extent. Yeah. It seems very curious. Can
I say, Joseph, that I'm glad we've ended on this. I know we've got other graphics that I sent, but maybe we can use that in another interview, which actually shows how the code points to the cache of records under the left forepaw of the Sphinx, which goes along with what Manu has found recently.
Well, is this stuff that is this in public domain? Because I've heard of this.
No, this is something I've not shared yet.
Okay.
I've not shared.
I have heard about these hall of records underneath the Giza that are waiting to be unearthed and brought to light, because there's a lot of information there. But as I said, I have heard it from other people, and it's until I'm actually there looking at it physically, I can only say it sounds magical, really.
It is. All this is magical. I mean, it's but it's all backed up with good mathematical, proof. And it can't really be argued with. It can't. I mean, no one could have predicted that number. So really, as I said, everything else about the RFI, when people are kind of pulling it apart, trying to pull what Jim Penniston had claimed with a code. I mean, there's no way Jim Penniston could have devised this,
Oh no, I definitely feel if there is any validity in the whole mathematics around this actually determining what you've come from the fine structure constant and other things, if that is all a genuine mathematical model behind that, then I don't think it would have been it's a hoax coming from Jim Penniston. But it's we don't know who it came from though too, so it's
no, we don't, and that's the bottom line as well, that we don't know. I mean,
you can only speculate, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, it is, but we can say that whoever devised it is able to manipulate time and space.
Well, and consciousness as well. But what I'm guessing from looking at all this information, as hard as it can be to try and understand from all the lines and the azimuths and all this, is that there's something here that needs to be taken into account as there's something going on that's beyond our current knowledge of these pyramids weren't built by a bunch of slaves during the time of Khafre or whatever. And these are ancient sites from way back and built by beings of high technological nature. I think there's a lot of credibility to that argument from various sources, and all this, it seems like it's a level of mathematics and knowledge that's beyond probably most people's understanding of trying to to picture.
It's very difficult.
I mean, because we're not used to thinking or modeling the world in terms of phi and the spiral dynamics and the spatial geometry of things, and talking in royal qubits, or it's a leap into an area which is not natural for a lot of our minds to understand, but maybe one day we will.
I was going to say that the code is a temporal anomaly. I mean, it's things that have emerged from the code kind of only make sense years later, and you get people saying, "Oh well, why did Jim Penniston sit on the code for 30 years? Why didn't he come forward with it before? Why did he hide it away and not say anything about it?" But maybe there was a subliminal kind of message put in his head, or some kind of, I don't know, command that was put in his head not to talk about it until, when was it, 2010, 30 years later? Because then, once it was out, then he gave it to me to look at, and it's taken like 12 years to work all this out. And I mean, in 2018, that's when the inverse fine structure constant number come out, which was generated by that latitude, and so that all from the code. So there was maybe a reason why. There's another reason why he sat on it instead of just being embarrassed by it. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Does this, when you've been diving into this, has it ever made you think that we're all pawns in someone else's chess game?
I have to laugh about this because it's like someone's looking over your shoulder from the future, or some, outside of our time. And the funny thing is, Manu, I showed him how his work is kind of being implicated by the code, what's coming up, and he was absolutely gobsmacked. He said, "Are you saying that we're all working to a script that, it's already known about what we're doing?" And I said, "Yeah, basically that's what it's kind of showing us, It's like a demonstration in retrocausality, this about the fine structure constant, especially. But when you look at all the information that's come out of it, and there is such a lot. I mean, when I was talking about this, it's also pointing to something under the Sphinx. I mean, that's another part of it, It's a whole different level. It's like there's just multiple levels of data here.
Yeah, should we try and get through to the next slide and discover more?
Right. So
this is the comment of Kalimahos.
Lambros, yeah. I mean, it's a declassified NSA document.
Yeah.
And he says it will not be difficult for them, he's talking about, our intelligence, to demonstrate their intellectual and was it? I can't really read it properly. It's too small. Technological.
So I think from what it said, and this is 1974, and I think what this, and I think Jim, I think I talked about this with Jim, is that if whoever wanted to send this message saw this and use this as to frame somehow how they were going to build the message, it was almost like a response to this, because this was 6 years before. Could it be?
Yeah, it could be, but also what Carl Sagan had said when he said that.
Yeah, so this is not Carl Sagan, but this is connected in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, it's connected. But
yeah,
what is really connected is this movie called UFO, titled UFO, which came out in 2018. Again, 2018.
Okay.
And Gillian Anderson and David Strathairn, they were the actors in the
I've
film.
not seen this. I feel like I should.
Yeah, no, you should, because it's a decent movie about a phenomenon. But see, what comes up in that is what the plot is that there's a UFO sighting, and somehow this guy was able to, I don't know how he got hold of it, but he got hold of a message that was sent, and it was in binary code, and it had the fine structure constant in it.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think, wait a minute, I think in one of the slides, I think I've give reference to it. I've shown a reference to it.
Yeah, is that it?
Yeah, so the 2018 movie UFO, which starred Gillian Anderson and David Strathairn, the movie is about a talented college math student finding a binary code.
And you weren't aware of this movie when you were doing your research, or were you, in terms of?
No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't.
Okay.
I think I saw it in 2019.
So this was after the fact. After the fact, you then see a movie about the same thing, is it?
Yeah. Someone alerted me to it, and so I watched it around about the time when when the fine structure constant was published, because it was published a year after. You see, it was determined in 2018, but Code Data, they publish it. They publish the new determinations every 4 years, and they publish it 6 months. Well, the following year when it's been determined.
That is curious.
So, yeah, and as I said, it was when I looked on the Wikipedia, and I found that the last 3 digits were exactly the same as what the Golden Cut Latitude in 1980 had generated. I just knew then that the code has authenticated itself. It was authentic.
I feel like I should have watched this movie before this interview, so I could relate to it. I feel like I'm going to go and watch it now.
Yeah, so what there is there's a quote by Ryan Eslinger, who was the guy who made the movie. And he says, NARCAT publishes technical reports on UFO sightings, including the O'Hare airport sighting. And I also came across the classified documents that the NSA published, which is what that quote was, from the NSA document, online, concerning potential methods of communication with other life forms. So one document in particular talks about using things like the fine structure constant in our communications, which informed the decoding of the signal. They also consulted with. I can't read this probably because it's too small.
Sorry,
I've even got my glasses on. Yeah, an astrophysicist at Ohio State University, Paul Sutter, who fact-checked the script as much as you can fact-check a movie called UFO. During our discussion, the idea of using binary as a method of communication came up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's a kind of strange synchronicity there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then I think maybe it was meant. Whoever devised the code knew that this would all be coming up anyway.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next one? Yeah. Yeah. So what I found with this quote from a magazine, a short take on Ryan Eslinger's UFO by Brian Sentence, May 26th. See that date, May 26, 2019.
Yeah.
That's the actual date when the new determination of fine structure constant was published on Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
And he says at the end here, he says, solving the more complex communications received from the aliens, which in turn suggests, though this is never spoken by any character, that the aliens are not from a distant point in space, but in time, namely our own future.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I was meant to see that. You know, it's like
yeah, it's a theory that's gaining traction. This I think is it my masters who calls them extra tempestual rather than extraterrestrial. The idea,
yeah, sure,
rather than being from another world but from another time. It's quite intriguing and adds another layer of complexity to this whole puzzle.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why Jim Penniston and I are kind of swimming against the tide. Really, we're trying to get people to understand this. You know, there's been this message, and it is legit because no one could have predicted the number. But what it is the reason why we're swimming against the tide is because there's so many people in the UFO community who believe that it's extraterrestrials, or you know, even though there's not really any real evidence that that's what is behind the phenomenon. And I don't really endorse us from the future. I mean, I wouldn't say I really endorse it's us from the future, that scenario or hypothesis. But I keep my mind open. I wouldn't say I believe. I think once you say you believe in something, then you're restricted. You're limited to that belief, and you're not open to other possibilities. So I never say I believe. Keep my mind open, but I'm very skeptical about things, you know. Yeah. And as I said, all I can say is that whoever devised the code is an advanced intelligence that is not confined to the laws of our temporal spatial reality. That's all I can say.
Mm-hmm. I think what joins us, a lot of people in the UFO community, isn't what we believe in terms of what or the speculation of what's going on. It's more a case of believing that the current narrative is not the true narrative. There's something bigger, and I think
it doesn't. Yeah,
that's always happened all the way through time, all the way through Copernicus and Galileo and all. Then it was. There's always been a collection of people that have said, "Well, our current belief system might not be the truth," and they've always been stigmatized until eventually it breaks through, and then there's a new belief system, and then a new one. It kind of that's how evolution of the mind is, and I think we're just going through another stage of that right now, right? So breaking our own belief systems to create new ones.
Yeah, advances at one funeral at a time. You know, with new generations that are coming up, they're more open to, you know.
That's right. Yeah.
Other points of view. So, yeah, I mean, there's no way anyone could have predicted that. So, Jim Penniston could not have devised this. It's too complex. He just doesn't have the patience. He doesn't read a lot.
But having now met him in the podcast and got to know him, I can't see if some of his character wanting to do that for any reason. I mean, he's clearly didn't want to come out with any of this really until recently.
No, he's a no-nonsense guy. You see, he's a military guy and he's been taught to keep secrets.
Yeah.
So a lot of people think that because he's not totally open, it's like he's not totally open, but he's got a filter where he just keeps the information back because that's what he's been taught. That's how he is. So, but they see that as him being, you know, kind of deceptive in some way. And it's not true because I've known Jim for 12 years now and we've gone over everything. So when I come up with something that someone's been saying, like some skeptic has been raising some issue, and I ask him about it, and he explains it. I said, why didn't you make that clear? Why didn't you? Because there's one thing about Jim, he's not very clear on what he says, and you can easily kind of get confused. But really, after everything that we've talked about, I can see that he's been able to, you know, explain everything. And all these people, what they're doing is they don't understand it properly. They've misinterpreted, or they've misread something, or they've misheard what he said, or because a lot of people are confused sometimes with what he comes out with. But really, he's telling the truth. It's just that he's very evasive, you know, because he's very guarded on what he gives out. So,
yeah.
But that's not to say the man is dishonest. You know, I know John Burroughs, and he's running Jim down, and he's running the code down. But I know the guy, and I know that he's disingenuous a lot of the time with the truth, and you know, so and he's got an agenda. I think there's people pulling his strings, and there is, as I said, there's a concerted effort to try and discredit the code and dismiss it, because I think that it proves once and for all that there is a real phenomenon here.
I think that's the bottom line of what we're trying to get to ultimately with the code and with all the other discussions going on, is that there is a phenomenon. What it is, we're still trying to discover it, but there is something there. It's not a nothing burger, as some people complain. That word seems to get banded around a lot as a complete creation of our minds, or people wandering away and coming up with nonsense. I mean, there's so much this field when you touch into it and suddenly you realize how big it is, in all sorts of areas. So it's,
to me,
it just keep getting bigger and bigger.
To me, the code is legit. It's because of that number, Everything else just pales into insignificance.
It's not just that, but also the whole Rendlesham incident is what was for it, and that seems extremely legit given the military personnel that have talked about it and everything.
Yeah.
So and I appreciate
I want to talk about the book. I just want to talk about the book for a bit.
So I think we're back to one there. So do you want to, should we come out of this? Hold on, let me stop sharing. So hopefully, I don't know if you've got ability to maybe go again sometime, and because there's some questions.
But have you enjoyed it?
I
want to know if you've enjoyed it.
Oh, I have. Yeah, it's been good, and I'm sorry if I've pressed on certain areas, but I am, I guess, trying to act a bit like the mind of a skeptic who's looking at the angles and lines and things and trying to say, and I think it's important, if we want to see this information ever go mainstream, we have to be able to back up why these things are there. So hopefully we'll get to that point where we can sort of fully understand the logic, the process to get to that point. If someone was to take, I mean, that's the ultimate question, is someone to take those coordinates, go away and come back with the same ideas that you've got, then that would give validity to it, or anything that shares a similar logical process of knowledge.
Well, there are several PhD scholars and mathematicians that I've been talking to who endorse the code. I mean, one of them being Professor J.P. de Vierville, who was the cousin of Neil Armstrong, who is the late Neil Armstrong. So that there are people that kind of they're scholars in their field who are endorsing this.
I mean, and Neil Armstrong himself, didn't he, after everything that happened with the moon landing and everything, he went off on his own and he went to all these sacred places for various reasons.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
He kind of went on his own travels trying to discover things, and there's also Edgar Mitchell. He came up. He said he had inspiration while I was up there. So there's a lot of these astronauts who come back.
I was on a forum with, Jack Sephardi, the physicist, because I've known him since 1999, and we went to Uri Geller's house, and both of us, me and Jack Sephardi, because they both shared an experience, and they were talking about that. But people, I was put on this list of email recipients that Jack Sephardi has, and there was a lot of these top names there. People from the Aviary, the UFO group, the Aviary.
Kit Green
Kit Green. Was it Ron Pandolfi? CIA guy. Also Hal Puthoff. Hal Puthoff. All that circle of people. And I was talking to some of these people in private, and they wouldn't ever come out with it in public. And I won't mention names, but they were talking about the Kundalini. They said they had that experience. And it's like, I realized that experience kind of pulls people together in some way. And Jack Sephardi, he had that. He said he had that experience, but they won't talk about it because it's a kind of taboo subject. It isn't so much now, but it was back then. I mean, when I say I had this experience, it's like, okay, they call it enlightenment, but you're not enlightened. You don't remain enlightened. You might be able to look at things in a different way and connect things together. But I'm very analytical. See, I'm an analytical thinker, and so I'm an INTJ, which is what was it, the Myers-Briggs personality types. Okay. I'm an INTJ anyway, so a lot of people don't really understand me. You know, I've always been kind of mostly misunderstood. But yeah, I think the way I approach things, that's how I was able to, you know, extrapolate this information from the code.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a certain kind of mind, I guess, and I guess that's why it fell in my lap. It's the way I approach things.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I'm the chosen one. I'm just saying that, you know, there's someone that to decode it, and maybe they knew who was able to approach it in the right way to be able to do it. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I think the experience I had, yeah, I was going to say, I think the experience I had in '93, which was the 10th of November '93, the experience, I think it was conducive. I think it was all what I was doing after the experience and researching into it. I thought all that and what I discovered was all in preparation for me working on the code. That's what it seems. Mm-hmm. So I think the phenomenon that touched me and everything I was researching after, and the books I was writing and the things I was discovering, I think all that was in preparation for me working on the code in a way that I would approach it in the right way.
Cool. Okay. Well, I think in terms of time, and if you agree to maybe come back on and try and we could dive a bit deeper into this. Do you want to finish by talking a little bit about the book. Any books you're writing at the moment and how people can reach you?
Yeah, I'm writing on 2 follow-up books to the Rendlesham Enigma, which I wrote with Jim Penniston. Jim Penniston will contribute something, but I've had to do these 2 books just to show all this information that's come out of the code. I mean, that's what I thought I would be doing, but Jim wanted to write a book about his experience and the aftermath, you know, all the years, you know, afterwards and what happened. So I thought, yeah, well, that'd be a good foundation for the findings of the code to come out later, you know. So, yeah, I mean, the book, it's like, it's 700 pages or almost. I mean, and it's like a dissertation, you know, and all these end notes in there that give the facts of what was happening at the time, even things that Jim Penniston didn't know about, what going on around him at the time. So the main chapters are his account of the incident and the years afterwards, and the end notes are really about, you know, the things that are going on at that time with other witness accounts, other testimonies, and kind of it's more like a reference book really on Rendlesham, and I'm proud of it. I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's fascinating. The kind of the first section is fascinating just to hear the story, and then towards the end you get also another sort of layer of fascination about the I guess the relationships and the aftermath and the it gets a bit into that. So yeah, it's great.
I think
it's a great read. I recommend it for just to get a picture of just how this happened, and this also gives a UK perspective as well, because a lot of people, they know about Roswell, but not so much about Rendlesham. And I think Rendlesham is up there as probably the Roswell of the UK, as in the probably the one. I don't know if there's any other sighting in the UK that kind of eclipses it, but I can't think of one. So I think it's up there.
It's the most well documented case in military history, UFO military history.
Yeah, exactly. So
but you know, our book has really been cancelled. You know, like this cancel culture thing. It's really been cancelled in the UFO community. No one mentions it. No one gives it a review. No one in the UFO community wants to touch it, because what it does is it explains a lot of the things that they were always kind of bringing up, all these issues. And because it explains it, it's like, we won't mention that book because we don't want to be debunked ourselves, you know. So I think that's the reason why. And also because Jim Penniston, as I said, is against the popular narrative that is being sold about it's ET and that they're a threat and that kind of thing. So it's like he's like, as I said, we're swimming against the tide really.
Okay.
With this, so even though it's got a lot of good reviews on Amazon, you won't find it mentioned in the UFO community much. Although you do get emails from people and saying, "Oh, well, I think this book's great. It's just one of the best on the Rendlesham incident and UFOs in particular." You know, so you get them silently, sort of, you know, like behind the scenes, you get them talking about it, but in the UFO community, they don't mention it, which is strange.
Well, there's a lot of strange things going on in the UFO community, but I think the main thing is we get somewhere and we find out what's going on, or at least try to. Maybe, I mean, I've talked about this in other podcasts. We shouldn't maybe be so desperate for the end goal. We should just try and enjoy the journey, because trying to solve these puzzles is itself the enigma. It's part of the journey, and it's something. It's something that's important to itself, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do this for financial reasons, because really you don't make a lot of money out of books anyway. You know, to be truthful.
Just your curiosity.
But, and if I wanted to make money, I would have got something out on the code years ago, you know. But I wanted to make sure that the books I write, they're worth the money, you know, to people, and they're a good read. So I take particular kind of, you know, pleasure in just writing and making sure everything's perfect with it as much as I can, all the facts and everything I can get in there.
Well, on that note, maybe we can have James on next time, and he can ask you some questions. But thank you so much for doing this. It's been really good, and hopefully see you again another time soon.
Sure, thanks. Okay, see you soon.